Living alone after 65 does not always hurt in obvious ways. Sometimes it does not break your heart all at once. Sometimes it changes something much quieter and much deeper. It changes the feeling of coming home. It changes the texture of your days. And over time, if you're not careful, it can even change the way you feel about your own importance in the world. Because the hardest part is not always the empty chair across the room. Sometimes the hardest part is the feeling that no one naturally shares your life anymore. You may still be capable. You may still pay your bills, make your meals, keep your home in order, and do your best to stay strong. From the outside, it may look like you are doing perfectly fine. In many ways, you are. You are surviving. You are functioning. You are carrying on. But inside, something more delicate may be happening. You wake up and no one asks how you slept. You pour your coffee and no one notices whether you take it the same way you always have. Something funny happens, or something sad, or something small but strange, and there is no one right there to tell. No one nearby to catch the moment with you. No one to say, "Really, what happened?" No one to turn an ordinary moment into a shared one. And that kind of silence does something to a person. Not because you're weak, not because you cannot handle life, but because human beings were never meant to feel invisible inside their own days. That is part of what makes living alone later in life so emotionally difficult. It's not just the absence of people, it's the absence of being quietly witnessed. Many people over 65 do not say, "I'm lonely." They say, "I'm fine." They say, "I'm managing." They say, "I don't want to bother anyone." They say, "I'm used to it." And perhaps that is the saddest part of all. Because what hurts is not always dramatic. It's not always loud enough for other people to notice. It is small, repeated, quiet. It is the kind of pain that slips into everyday life and settles there. It is making dinner and realizing you no longer cook the way you used to, because cooking for one feels strange now. It is sitting in a room where the television is on, not because you care about what is playing, but because silence has started to feel too heavy. It is having a doctor's appointment, a restless night, a difficult afternoon, or a fleeting moment of good news, and knowing you will carry all of it by yourself. It is not always that you need help. Sometimes what you miss most is being known. You miss being expected. You miss being noticed. You miss having someone who sees the small things without needing to be told. You miss the kind of closeness that once made life feel naturally shared. And that kind of loss can be hard to explain, especially to people who are not living it. Living alone after 65 carries an emotional cost that many people rarely talk about honestly. The first cost is this: no one is naturally witnessing your life anymore. There may have been a time when someone noticed your routines without effort. They knew how you liked your coffee. They could hear something in your voice and ask, "What's wrong?" before you ever said a word. They could tell when you were tired or quiet or not quite yourself. They did not need a formal invitation into your life. They were already in it. And when that disappears, it is not only the person you miss, it is the daily closeness. It is the comfort of being known in ordinary moments. It is the quiet reassurance of being seen without having to ask for attention. That is why even a peaceful home can begin to feel heavy. The second cost is the loss of role. For many years, you may have been needed in clear and meaningful ways. You were a spouse, a parent, a worker, a caregiver, a steady presence in someone else's routine. People counted on you. People looked for you. People noticed when you showed up, and they noticed when you didn't. Then life changed. The job ended. The children grew up. A partner was lost. Friends moved away, became ill, or passed on. And slowly, the question becomes harder to ignore. Where do I fit now? Not because your value is gone, not because your life means less, but because when no one regularly depends on your presence, It can begin to feel as if your place in the world has grown smaller, and that feeling can be deeply painful, even when you try not to show it. The third cost is something many older adults carry in silence: the fear of being a burden. You may want to call someone. You may want to say, "Today was hard." You may want to ask for company, for help, or simply for a familiar voice on the other end of the line. But then another thought steps in. They're busy. I don't want to trouble anyone. I don't want to sound needy. I should be able to handle this on my own. So you say nothing, and the feeling does not go away. It simply stays inside, growing heavier because it has nowhere to go. That kind of silence is exhausting, not because you lack strength, but because strength is not the same as having no needs. And there is also a kind of shame that can quietly creep in when life becomes too still. Not loud shame, quiet shame. The kind that whispers, "Why is this affecting me so much? Why does this house feel so empty at night? Why do I feel forgotten when no one has actually been cruel to me? Why does the silence hurt more than I thought it would?" But the truth is, this pain makes sense. Of course, the evenings can feel long. Of course, the holidays feel different. Of course, walking into a quiet house can feel heavier than you ever expected. You are not overreacting. You are responding to the loss of closeness. And closeness is not a luxury. It is one of the things that makes life feel human. That is why this kind of loneliness can be so confusing. Your life may still look stable from the outside. You may still be functioning. You may still be independent. But inside, part of you may be grieving the loss of being closely woven into someone else's everyday life. And grief does not always come after death. Sometimes grief comes after change. Sometimes grief comes after distance. Sometimes grief comes after the slow disappearance of roles, routines, and relationships that once made life feel fuller. But here is something gentle and important to remember. Living alone does not mean your life has become small, and needing connection does not mean you have become fragile. It simply means your heart still remembers what it was made for. You still want warmth. You still want belonging. You still want to feel that your presence matters. There is nothing shameful about that.
In fact, one of the bravest things you can do in this season of life is to stop pretending the silence never touches you. You do not have to turn your pain into a performance. You do not have to explain everything to everyone, but you may need to tell yourself the truth. This is hard sometimes. I miss being closely known. I miss being part of someone's daily life, and that does not make me weak. Sometimes healing begins there, not with a dramatic breakthrough, not with a forced smile, but with honest words that let your heart breathe again. And from that place, small things can begin to matter again. You may not be able to change everything, but you can begin to protect the parts of yourself that have gone too quiet. You can reach toward one person instead of waiting to feel fully understood by many. You can create one steady point of connection in your week, so there is at least one moment when someone expects your voice, your story, your presence. You can stop apologizing for needing a little companionship. You can let one corner of your life become shared again. Even something simple matters. A regular phone call, a neighbor you greet by name, a church group, a walking partner, a grandchild you speak to every Sunday, a small routine outside the house that reminds you, I still belong somewhere. The answer is not to become busy just to escape your feelings. The answer is to rebuild meaning in gentle, human ways. Because the real wound is not just silence, it is the fear that your life is no longer being felt by anyone else. And that wound deserves tenderness, not judgment. So if you live alone after 65 and some days feel heavier than you admit, please hear this clearly. You are not failing at aging. You are not too sensitive. You are not a burden because you sometimes want company, care, or closeness. And you are not less important because fewer people see your everyday life. Your life still has weight. Your presence still matters. Your voice still matters. Your stories, your habits, your memories, your love, your wisdom, they all still matter. Even if the house is quiet, even if the phone does not ring as often as you wish, even if parts of your life feel unseen right now, you are still here, and that still means something. If this spoke to you, I would love to hear from you in the comments. What part of the day feels the quietest to you now? And if you've ever stopped yourself from calling someone because you did not want to be a burden, please know you are not alone in that either. This channel is here to remind you that your feelings are real, your presence matters, and your life is still deeply worth sharing. And if you would like more conversations like this, gentle, honest conversations for this season of life, stay here with us. You do not have to carry all of this silence by yourself.